Hello and welcome everyone. If you're tuning into this short video, this is a kind of part of our short video series looking at Imagineering Labs spaces and places for kind of looking at some best practice from different areas around the connection and kind of honing in a little bit on our calling, but also exploring other areas as well. If you haven't tuned into one of these before, my name is James. I'm the Regional Learning Network Coordinator for London. And as a learning network, we seek to serve churches, circuits and districts to live out their ministry and mission within their contexts. And I'm joined today by Abby Jarvis. Abby, welcome.
Hi, good to be with you.
Do you want to just, I suppose for people just tuning in before we dive into our conversation today, do you want to just explain to people a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm part of the evangelism and growth team, and my title is discipleship and faith formation, and I'm one of two officers with that role. So you may also know Andy Fishburn, my colleague, and basically our jobs are all around everything to do with discipleship, which is really exciting, but also it's kind of everything, isn't it? You know, everything is discipleship, isn't it? So we do things like prayer and encouraging people in prayer and what it means to be a praying community. But we also work really closely with our colleagues in evangelism and mission, in pioneering in church at the margins, to think about all of these things and think, what does it mean to be a disciple who engages in justice, who is out there being evangelistic, who is part of church at the margins, and all of these questions as well.
Wow, so just a small task.
Just very small.
Yeah, small portfolio. But what we are talking about today specifically is a Methodist way of life. And for people that are watching, some people may have a great depth and wealth of knowledge on that. And for some people, that might be a new thing. Do you want to just explain for us a little bit about what a Methodist way of life is?
Yeah, so a Methodist way of life is basically a rhythm of life that is built around the Methodist calling. So that calling of evangelism, service, worship, and learning and caring. But it's all about putting our beliefs into practice and living out who we are. Again, it's about, what does it mean to be a disciple? What difference does that make to our lives? And it's really helpful to bring intentionality and focus to our discipleship journeys, both as individuals but as communities as well. So there are 12 commitments within a Methodist way of life, and a lot of them will be really familiar to you because actually, they're the stuff that a lot of us are already doing. That's why it's a Methodist way of life. It's not brand new stuff. It is saying these are the things that it means to be part of the Methodist church and actually really to be part of the church in general. So there are commitments around prayer, around challenging injustice, around caring for ourselves and our neighbours. And it's really just saying these are the fundamental things. These aren't, they're not things we want to tick off a list and say, yep, I've done that today, so I'm a good disciple. But they're the things that we want to say, these are important to us. These are what it means to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus. And these are the ways that we are living them out in our lives each and every day.
So almost a framework for naming our own discipleship and being able to use that as a bit of I suppose a map, if you will, to kind of help us navigate maybe different areas and different facets and different spaces of our walk and our discipleship with Jesus, and kind of almost to give a bit of what I do, that is prayer, that is justice, those things I'm already doing, I can name them in a bit of a, it kind of gives a bit of a framework for that.
Yeah, and I personally find it really encouraging, to look at some of those commitments, and the full list is available, on the website and in various resources. But you look at that list, and there are some things that you feel really drawn to, and actually I think there's a vocational aspect sometimes of going, generosity and hospitality. Actually, that's something that is really core to who I am, and I feel particularly drawn into that area, and that can be a really encouraging thing to recognise in ourselves. But it's also a way of looking at some of those areas, maybe evangelism, I might suggest, and go, oh yes, I know I'm supposed to do that as a good Christian, but I couldn't actually tell you the last time, that I really focus in on there. It's maybe something that I've let go a little bit. I think bringing those kind of dual aspects of the good recognition of where we're strong, where God has gifted us, and also those things that just maybe we struggle with a little bit, is also just really helpful to call out to ourselves and to recognize, and as a community to sort of recognize in each other as well.
And I suppose as we think about some of those things, and the Methodist way of life as a space, as a framework, as we've talked about it, are there any really good stories around the connection that of people that are really engaging with that framework well, or aspects of that framework well, or aware that there are different facets to that?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, every story I could tell you about prayer or challenging injustice is almost default a Methodist way of life story, even if the people don't know it, because they're the commitments. But some of the ways people are engaging in the framework as a whole, really exciting, lots of different things I've seen. So I spoke with one circuit leadership team whose entire kind of mission strategy was focused around those 4 areas of our calling, and then also starting to bring in some of the specific commitments around a Methodist way of life. And they were really thinking, in missionally, in all of those things, what are we doing? What are we not doing? Where do we want to go? What is God calling us to in this next season? And there was another church who took their prayer diary and said, okay, we want to be really intentional in making sure that within our prayer diary, we include some of those commitments. So we want to pray about challenging injustice. We want to pray about people who we want to come to know Jesus, or to take the next step in their journey with Jesus. We want to pray about our worship services and making them, as great as they can be, and really going for it and bringing them to the next level. And just, I can't remember the exact examples they used, but they were really intentional in saying, we are bringing this into our prayer diary and using this as part of that structure to make sure that we are praying, about all areas of discipleship. There's also a lot of churches on circuits are doing sermon series. So there's a series of sermons on the website as a resource that you can download. And a lot of circuits are starting to use those as a way of introducing a Methodist way of life across the whole circuit, which I think is really exciting. And actually some that did that during lockdown, they're now continuing. And one circuit said that, rather than having lots of small evening services on a Sunday that very few people came to, they've decided to keep that as an online service and really orient that around the commitments of a Methodist way of life across the circuit. And they were saying how exciting that was, that people were able to be in a community that they hadn't had before, and meet people from across the circuit that they hadn't known before, and share stories and exchange that. So there's lots of different things. Small groups as well is a big thing, so each of those commitments has questions that go alongside it, so that we can, if I say hold each other accountable, that can sound quite harsh, and I don't mean it in that way at all. It's not about catching each other out because we're not doing things. It's about checking in with each other. And this really goes all the way back to Wesley. This is something that he really encouraged people to do in small bands, of saying, how are you getting on? That question of how is it with your soul? And a Methodist way of life has taken some of those same ideas and said, let's just check in with each other. Have we spoken to a neighbour this week? Have we cared for ourselves this week? How have we done that? And lots of those groups kind of started to pop up all across the country, which is really, really encouraging.
And I suppose a way as well, I was thinking, as you were talking there about when Paul writes about running the race that's set out for us, this is a way where we can really champion each other on, almost a framework for cheering in some ways, that we can cheer each other on, that we can champion each other to continue to keep on following Jesus, to continue to keep walking, keep running, whatever that race looks like for us, but to, as a framework to enable us to keep on going as well in our, and to be intentional about that in our discussions, in our conversations, as when we come together as churches around the country.
Yeah, and I love that, it is a Methodist way of life, not a Methodist church. We're part of the Methodist church, but this is about all of our lives. And one of the things that always strikes me reading the gospel stories and Acts is how much time the early church spent together. Jesus and his disciples lived together. as they journeyed. The early church, they ate together, they met in each other's houses, you know, they were constantly part of each other's lives. And that's one of the things I love about this is, you know, we are today, we should be perhaps, you know, kind of constantly in each other's lives. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, knock on your neighbour's door every 5 seconds. There are limits. We all like our alone time, but that idea that we know what's going on in each other's lives between Sunday services, you know, and that we're able then when we see people to say, well, how did that, you know, you were really nervous about that meeting at work. How did it go? You know, that's kind of the accountability we're sort of talking about, is, you know, that just checking in with each other. And, you know, you said there was someone at work who was really interested in the resurrection, and you were going to try and have that conversation with them. Did you have that conversation with them? You know, and if you didn't, you know, is it something maybe you could come back to? And it is just about living life together, really.
Yeah. And maybe if someone who attends a church or goes as part of a circuit leadership team that maybe hasn't formally engaged in kind of a Methodist way of life in terms of some of the framework that we've talked about and the resources that are available, how can a church or circuit team begin the journey of maybe bringing this into their circuit and church life?
First thing I would say is talk to James, talk to me, you know, talk to people who are here to support you in this journey. You don't have to kind of work out how to do it on your own. That's part of our roles, is to journey alongside you, and we'd love to have those conversations. You can, if you go on the Methodist Church website, I think it's /MWOL, you'll find various resources there that if they're helpful to you, you can download. You know, as I said, there's a sermon series, there's a resource for small groups, various other things that could be helpful. But the other thing I would really say is, forgetting about kind of the resources for a moment, is, you know, it is a way of life. So really engaging means engaging not with the resources, but with the way of life. So that is, as individuals, it is being an example, and actually, you know, looking at those commitments ourselves and saying, well, how am I doing with my prayer life right now? If I want to encourage other people in their prayer life, what am I doing to challenge injustice? And then it's as a community, whether that is a kind of based around a Sunday service, or it's a pioneering cafe, or it's a rural class, or it's a digital fellowship, it's engaging then as a whole community and saying, this is something that we are going to explore together. And some of those resources, like the sermon series, might help you to do that. But it's also in the everyday conversations, and it's about everyone having a voice. And I think, you know, doing this intergenerationally is, I think, so critical. And there are some of those commitments that are going to resonate more with different generations. So how do we get different generations together to explore these commitments, to think about what they mean to us as individuals and communities, and to be excited by each other, you know, to catch the passion that somebody else might have for a commitment that you would really struggle with. And then the final thing I would just say also is to talk to other churches, and maybe some of those who have already started to engage, and we could put you in touch with people if you're interested in doing that, but also to talk to other churches in the circuit. And I think that's one of the things we've seen has worked really well, is when whole circuits look at this together. So if you are involved, you know, in local church leadership, and have the conversations, get other people alongside you, and see what happens.
Great. Well, that is, I suppose, a great whistle-stop tour of a Methodist way of life. And we will send out, when we kind of send out this video, is there'll be some of those links that you talked about in terms of the resources to small groups and sermons, as well as the wider resources to the kind of the commitments. We'll make those available along with the video as well. So if you're watching this video, do check either the bio or the email that it came with for those links, so you can find out more. But thank you ever so much, Abby, for sharing a little bit more about a Methodist way of life with us, and thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you ever so, and thank you for watching this video. As I said, the information will be sent out in a link, and if you do have any questions, please do get in touch with myself through kind of our regional email contact, or through Abby, which I'm presuming through the church website, but you know, we will possibly send that link out as well with the video. But thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you soon.